So the classes that we've just been talking about and modules, these are all ways that you can take your code and package it for other people to use and to kind of transition from being a data scientist to also being sort of a developer and writing code for other people to use. So I wanted to, it's a good segue to talk about coding style. So there's a number of different things we can talk about. I wanted to focus on a few key points from the text, but also talk about this thing called PEP8. So Python more generally, so this is from Wikipedia. Python is meant to be an easily readable language. Its formatting is visually uncluttered, and it often uses English keywords where other languages use punctuation. Unlike many other languages, it does not use curly brackets to delimit blocks, and semicolons after statements are optional. It has fewer syntactic exceptions and special cases than C or Pascal. So Python is meant to be a English-looking language that's very readable, and in that spirit, there are also some style guides for how you should write Python code. And we've talked about a few of these, and some of them are enforced by the Jupyter Notebook coding environment, but we're going to look at this thing called PEP8, which is Python Enhancement Proposal number 8 that was adopted to formalize some of these things. So we can just click on this link, and it should open up a new window. So it'll take us to the python.org developer's guide. So this is PEP8 style guide for Python code. So there's a lot of good information here. I'll just highlight a few things. One is code layout, indentation. You automatically will indent after a function or after in a block, like usually 4 spaces. But if you have a long line, you can, for example, this is effectively a tuple or a list. You can, between the second and the third element here, you can, after the comma, you can hit enter, and then you indent in line here. That's sort of the standard format, and your Python notebook should help you with that. So your hanging indents should add a level. It gives you some things not to do. There's a lot more examples here with lists. Spaces are preferred. You can set up your text editor to use 4 spaces instead of a tab. When you type tab, you can still type the tab character, but it will use spaces instead of the actual tab character. But if you have code that already has tab characters, you want to be consistent with that. Line lengths should be less than 80 characters if possible. This is a style thing. I sometimes have longer line lengths, but when you start contributing to bigger software projects and they're enforcing these requirements, you're going to have to fix it. So try to keep your lines shorter than 80 characters. You recommended to, if you're using like binary operators, to put the operator before the thing you're operating on and not on the previous line. You should use blank lines in certain places to enhance readability. You should import packages on separate lines unless you're importing like sub modules here. There's a lot more stuff here. You can take some time to review this, and I think this will help you understand a bit more about why we do certain things in Python and how it helps to maintain readability. Finally, with regard to a few different things, I just wanted to highlight a few things from Shaw. So with regard to functions, if functions are part of classes, they're called methods, but it's the same thing. You want to name your function not necessarily as what the function does, but as if it's a command that you're giving to the class. It makes it more active. So for a list has this method called pop, and not remove from end of list. That might be a good name for a function, but for a method that's of a class, something more active is good. And the function itself, we want to keep them small and simple. With classes, we want to use this camel case. I'm not sure where that term comes from, but you'll see where you have all of the words are smushed together without underscores, and then the first letter is capitalized. So this would be how you would name a class, whereas a variable or a function could have underscores and lowercase style formatting. So yeah, your function should be like this. In fact, I want to so using the underscore style format is better. With classes, you want to be consistent in how you organize your functions. So this is a good rule of thumb across the board. But if your function takes 3 arguments and it's dog, cat, and user, don't have another function that takes them in a different order. That would just create confusion. Try not to use variables that come from the module or global. So the variables that you use in your class should be local to that class or passed to it when you create it. And again, we want to use this class name object style formatting. Readability, we talked about this with the PEP8 just a second ago, but you want code between your lines, so you want to have spaces. We've been doing this a lot, but to make readability, if you have any more than 5 or 6 lines, and it's maybe good to in logical places to add some space between your lines, and definitely to set off a block of code. Also horizontal space, like for example, if you're adding things or you have commas. I'm going to add that in actually. I like to have some space there so you can really set it off and see what's going on instead of having everything smushed together. And generally, if you can't read it out loud, it's probably hard code to read. Finally, comments. So you should be writing comments. You should be saying what your code is doing, and even more important than what your code is doing, why you're doing it. So it might be very obvious to you now why you're doing something when you write code, but a month later, a year later, you come back. It would be really nice if you put some very succinct description about what you're doing and why, so that when you come back, a few months or a year later, it's like, oh yes, now I know why I'm doing this big long of code that took me 5 hours to write. But if I just would tell my future self what it's doing, that would save me a lot of time figuring it out. Or even better, not just your future self, but someone else who's trying to read your code, if you're doing more collaboration and development. Again, these dot comments, we haven't really done this a lot where we're putting comments right underneath the function definition, but that's a common style to do. Tells someone what that function does. And while you do want to make comments, you don't want them too long because that's extra things you have to maintain. So as you're editing your code and making changes to the code, you should write the comments pretty much up front. But if you change the code and it does something different, then you need to update that comment. So you should update the comments, but don't make them laboriously long, because that's just more work for you to maintain. So as I said, I think a practical example on classes will be great, but we're running out of time for today. So I'm going to put something up here, and I'll let you guys know. And but you're encouraged to play around with this yourself. If you can find a way to use classes and modules in your final project, that would be great. You don't have to, but take that as a challenge. And that's it for today. Next time we're going to do, in the last lesson, we're going to do Git and GitHub, which will be how you can get your code, no pun intended, onto the web and share it with other people.